Candida was a 23-metre yacht built to the international rule by Camper and Nicholson in 1929 for the banker Herman Andre. She raced with other big-class yachts in regattas around the British shores. This unique amateur film was taken during the 1930 season in the West Country by Sir Terence Stone, who was son-in-law to Herman Andre, husband to Sophie Andre, and a guest on board Candida. Big-class yacht racing had been revived after the First World War under the leadership of King George V, whose Britannia, built in 1893, figures largely in this film. Owners were generally rich magnates in industry, trade and banking, who relied on professional crews and skippers. However, Herman Andre represented a new breed of owner who actually took the helm of their own vessels. Andre was, in fact, one of the finest yachtsmen of his generation. 1930 was a watershed in yachting. Some of the big class seen in this film were still gaff-rigged, while others had adopted the Bermudan rig, or Marconi rig as it was originally called. Also the same year, Sir Thomas Lipton's Shamrock 5 challenged for the America's Cup and was on her way across the Atlantic when this film was shot. She'd been built to the J-class of the American Universal Rule instead of the International Rule, this being the first time a common building formula had been used by both countries for the Cup races. The following year, many of the big class, including Candida, were adapted to race against the J-class Shamrock 5, although they still needed to race with handicaps. Patrick Egan, who narrates this film, was a friend of the Andre family and a very fine yachtsman in his own right.
It is an interesting thing that you will see in these pictures a regatta showing the Brixham trawlers. Fishing boats provided the crews for all the yachts. In fact, practically 90% of the professional paid hands came from Brixham, the East Coast, Brightlingsea, Wivenhoe, and the Cornish coast. Note the tan sails of the Brixham trawlers, 50 or 60 probably of these wonderful old fishermen. Not one of them left today. Here we are on board Candida. Getting the mainsail up. She was one of the first of the big yachts to be Bermuda rigged. Candida was one of the most luxurious of yachts. It was my good fortune to be able to stay in her on many occasions. And here we have the racing yachts before the start. This is the White Heather, the 23-metre, which belonged to Lord Waring. This is Lulworth, which was a huge, great hard-weather boat built after the war. Drawing nearly 18 feet of water. Hoisting the spinnaker. The weight of these sails was pretty stupendous. That is the King's Britannia, which started the ball rolling after the war. Gilby, who was the professional skipper in Candida, and they are following Britannia quite closely, having just rounded the mark. The whole conception of sailing in these big boats was so entirely different from sailing today, where there's no room for passengers. We always, in these big boats, had at least half a dozen people who knew nothing about yacht racing at all, but just went for the joy of the party, and it was a great honor to be invited on board. That is Herman Andre, as I've already mentioned, one of our great helmsmen, and father of Sophie Stone, whose husband took these remarkable pictures. Quite a breeze here, as you can see, and before they were modified to come into the J class, you will see they had these quite substantial bulwarks, which did, when they were heeled over, carry a great deal of water, which was quite dangerous. Now watch them coming to the mark with, there they go, white heather, rounding the mark first. Look what a lot of water there is on deck. We would be down, right down to the deck house. Astra, probably the first time we have seen her, built for Sir Mortimer Singer. That was Lady Frank, whose husband owned Astra for a short time. Look at the primitive winch, rather like a mill. There we are in Candida. Must be remembered that these yachts were all racing on handicap, £100 for first prize, which was divided amongst the professional crew. Herman Andre at the helm of Candida. Britannia passing Babbacombe. Now you will see those bulwarks which I mentioned. That was a close shave, wasn't it? Astra. Plenty of activity getting in the main sheet, and now all lying up to windward. Isn't that a wonderful picture? Now here we have two 12 meters. There was a healthy class of about 10 of these sailing all round the coast. Here we are warping stern first into Torquay Harbour. Look how beautifully folded that mainsail is, that it's come down completely flaked of its own accord. This is Sophie Andre, Sophie Stone, whose husband has taken all the pictures. Now, this is the first time we've seen the great Herreshoff schooner westward. 3 of these great schooners were built, a sister ship to the westward, and one which was considerably bigger, called the Magdalene. Westward was quite an anomaly, as she really was very difficult to fit into the class, being 323 tons. If they could get a long reach and it was blowing really hard. No yacht was a match for her. But of course she was so unwieldy, short-tacking. Britannia sailed by Sir Philip Hunlock, the first of the amateurs to sail a big yacht, followed by Herman Andre, and then all the owners took to it. Candida, yeah, bowling along at about 12 knots. A wonderful sensation. Of course, the interest in these large yachts was tremendous. People used to stand out on the cliffs looking down on these great yachts. Today, the yachts are so small in comparison that you can't see them. In those days, of course, it was quite different. Coming back into Torquay Harbour. We're still in Tor Bay, getting ready to get underway. The owner never took the helm until Candida was under sail. Flat calm. Britannia has come along. She has not set her huge jackyard topsail. I think you're going to see now. Yes, you can see it being hoisted up alongside the mainsail. It was quite a feat setting that. Gilby, the skipper. Gilby was a great character. He used to have a splendid remark when he was getting agitated and saying, our side in the middle of the boat. None of us ever knew what the hell he meant by our side in the middle of the boat. I don't think he knew himself. Andre and his skipper. Spinnaker boom out, ready to set the spinnaker. No parachute spinnakers as we have in these days. Look at this rounding the mark. It's a good picture. There you've got the crew putting the spinnaker along the deck and making it up with pieces of rotten cotton, which of course when the sail was hoisted had to break out. It's a little difficult to realize the tremendous activity that took place when these boats were rounding marks, and tremendous muddles one could get into, setting spinnakers, lowering jib topsails. That is Sonny Andre, owner's son. That is the Cutty-Sark, Falmouth Harbour, which was owned by Captain Darman before she was handed over to the nation. A lot of heavy cloud. Coming into Falmouth Harbour, wonderful sailing ground. very close, jockeying for the start. A wonderful feeling of power steering one of these boats in a breeze. It would be hard to realize what tremendous powers of concentration Herman Andre had, which made him such a wonderful helmsman. I have seen him at the end of a long turn to windward, completely exhausted at the end of the first lap. Here we have Cambria. They're going to jibe and so save the boom coming over too quickly. You will have noted Gilby had taken the main sheet into his hands. After a race, we'd all be very wet, just as one would be in a dinghy, and we went below, we had a bath, we changed for our evening meal, dined extremely well, and then there was always a post-mortem on the day's racing. Frequently, Herman Andre, who was a great connoisseur of wines, particularly German wines, and we would either celebrate a win or we would commiserate on our loss. The medicine was always the same. Tremendous arguments would ensue over what we should have done and what we hadn't done. Models were put on the saloon table. But it was a great life.